You're listening to the Computer Repair Academy podcast, a show that's your go-to podcast for easy tech fixes, pro tricks, computer repair tips, and everything you need to keep your computer running smoothly. So if you're ready to upgrade your tech game, then let's dive in.
Hey there, and welcome back to the Computer Repair Academy podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today we're tackling one of the most frustrating issues you can encounter, a completely dead PC. You press the power button and nothing happens. No lights, no fans, no beeps, just silence. But don't panic. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through a few steps to troubleshoot a dead PC. From diagnosing power supply issues to checking components like the motherboard and RAM, by the end of this episode, you'll have the tools to bring your PC back to life. Let's jump right in. Before we get into the more technical troubleshooting, let's start with some simple things you might overlook. It happens to the best of us. So let's rule out the obvious first. First things first, make sure your PC is actually getting power. Double check that the power cable is securely plugged into both your PC and the wall socket. If you're using a power strip, make sure it's turned on. It sounds simple, but this is something that's easy to miss, especially if you're in a hurry. Next, try plugging another device into the same outlet, like a lamp or a phone charger, just to make sure the outlet itself isn't the issue. If the outlet isn't working, try another one or check your home circuit breaker. Believe it or not, the power button on your PC case might be faulty. To test this, you can bypass the power button by manually shorting the power switch pins on the motherboard with a screwdriver. If the PC turns on, you know the button needs replacing. Be advised, this trick isn't for the faint of heart and should be performed by a pro if you're not comfortable inside a PC. If your PC still isn't showing any signs of life, it's time to dig a little deeper and check the internal components. Next up, we need to check the power supply unit, or PSU. A faulty PSU is one of the most common reasons for a dead PC, so let's figure out if that's the problem. Even if your PC doesn't turn on, check if there's any sign of power getting through to the motherboard. Does the power supply fan spin? Do any lights on the motherboard come on? If you're getting absolutely nothing, there's a good chance your PSU is the culprit. To confirm if the PSU is faulty, you can use a PSU tester, which is a simple tool you can find for pretty cheap. It'll show whether the PSU is delivering power to your components. If you don't have a tester, you can do the paperclip test. First, unplug your PSU from everything, especially the PC components and power source. Next, take a paper clip and bend it into a U shape. You'll insert one end into the green wire slot on the big 24-pin connector and the other end into any black wire slot on the connector. Then, plug the PSU into the wall and flip the switch on the PSU. If the PSU fan spins, it's not completely dead, but this doesn't guarantee it's working properly under load. If you have an extra PSU or can borrow one from a friend, swap it out and see if the PC powers on. This is the best way to confirm that your PSU is the issue. If the PSU test passes but your PC still won't turn on, it's time to check some of the other components. Now let's take a look at the motherboard. If your PSU is working, the next most likely cause is a problem with your motherboard or a bad connection. Make sure that all the power cables are connected properly, especially the big 24-pin motherboard connector and the 8-pin CPU power connector. These are critical for your system to get power. If one of these isn't connected properly or is loose, your PC won't power on. Visually inspect the motherboard for any obvious signs of damage, like burnt components or bulging capacitors. If you see anything like that, your motherboard might need to be replaced. If you're still having trouble, you can try breadboarding your system. This means disconnecting everything except for the essentials, the CPU, one stick of RAM, and the power supply, outside of the case to rule out any short circuits or case issues. If your system powers on like this, the problem could be with one of the additional components or a grounding issue with the case. Before you assume the motherboard is fried, reseat all your cables and components to make sure nothing is loose. A loose cable can sometimes be all that's standing between you and a working PC. If your PSU and motherboard seem fine, the next components to check are the RAM, CPU, and GPU. Faulty RAM can cause a PC not to boot. Try reseating the RAM sticks. Remove them and then plug them back into the same slots. If that doesn't work, try booting with just one stick of RAM at a time. If your PC boots with one stick but not the other, you've found the problem. Although less common, a bad CPU can prevent your system from booting. However, CPU failure is rare unless there's been significant overheating or physical damage. To rule it out, make sure your CPU is properly seated in its socket and that the CPU cooler is correctly attached. If the cooler isn't mounted properly, the CPU could overheat instantly, preventing it from booting. If your system has a standalone graphics card, try removing it and connecting your monitor to the integrated graphics on your motherboard. This helps rule out whether the GPU is causing the problem. If your PC boots without the GPU, it's likely that the graphics card needs to be replaced. Remember, if your system doesn't have integrated graphics, you'll need the GPU installed to test your system. Many motherboards come equipped with a post speaker that beeps in different patterns to signal what's wrong with your PC. These beeps can be a huge help in narrowing down the issue. When you power on your system, listen closely for beep codes. If you hear a series of beeps, look up your motherboard's manual or search online for a post-beep code chart. Each pattern of beeps corresponds to a different problem, whether it's a RAM issue, a CPU problem, or something else. Some higher-end motherboards have debug LEDs or even digital error code displays that tell you exactly where the issue lies. These codes are listed in your motherboard manual, and they can point you to the component that's causing the failure. If your motherboard doesn't have a speaker, you can buy a cheap post speaker online and plug it into the motherboard speaker pins. It's a simple tool that can save you hours of guessing. All right, folks, it's story time again, and today we're diving into one of my all-time favorite tech support moments. We'll call this one the case of the unplugged PC. And if you've ever had a moment where you thought your computer was totally fried, only to realize it was something ridiculously simple, you'll appreciate this one. So I get a call from a client who's in full panic mode. Their computer has completely died. It was working last night, but this morning, nope, it won't turn on, no lights, no sounds, nothing. Total blackout. Now, when you hear something like that, you start mentally preparing for a range of possibilities. Failed power supply, maybe a fried motherboard. Basically, it could be a mess. So I head over to their house, and the client meets me at the door with this look of total defeat. They're talking about how their whole world has come crashing down because their computer just won't start. Their pictures, their documents. Oh no. We get to the office where the PC is sitting. It's under the desk, looking all sad and lifeless. So I sit down, start going through the usual routine, checking cables, making sure everything's connected, pressing the power button. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But something about this feels too quiet. I glance over at the power strip and sure enough, it's completely off. Like the switch is flipped, no juice going to the whole setup. I ask the client, hey, did you check the power strip? And they look at me like I've just asked them to recite the alphabet backward. Turns out, when they were vacuuming the night before, they accidentally stepped on the power strip switch and turned off everything, including their dead PC. Yep. All that stress, all that panic, and the solution was literally flipping a switch. So I calmly flipped the switch back on, hit the power button, and voila, the PC boots up perfectly, like nothing ever happened. The look on their face was priceless, equal parts relief and total embarrassment. Hey, it happens to the best of us. I've had more than a few oops moments myself, but this is why troubleshooting a dead PC starts with the basics. Sometimes the issue isn't your computer at all, but something simple like a loose cable, or in this case, a power strip playing hard to get. Now, we had a good laugh about it, and I reassured them that they weren't the first or the last to fall victim to the dreaded unplugged power strip. But it's a great reminder that when your PC won't turn on, always check the obvious stuff first. You don't want to be the person who calls tech support only to find out you just needed to hit a switch. So, the moral of the story? Before you start stressing about a dead PC, do yourself a favor and check the power strip. It might just save you a lot of time, panic, and, let's be honest, potential embarrassment. Okay, so there you have it. A quick story and few items to help troubleshoot a dead PC. Let's do a quick recap of the steps. Remember to check the basics, make sure your PC is plugged in, the power button works, and the outlet is functioning. Test the power supply, use a PSU tester, or try swapping out the PSU with another one to see if that's the issue. Inspect the motherboard and connections. Make sure all power cables are connected properly and look for physical flaws or damage. Test the RAM, CPU, and GPU. Try booting with minimal components and reseating everything. And lastly, listen for post-beep codes. These can help pinpoint exactly what's going wrong. I hope this helps you bring your PC back to life. If you have any questions or need more troubleshooting tips, feel free to reach out to me on social media or drop us a comment. I'd love to help. And if you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the Computer Repair Academy podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
Thanks again for tuning in to the Computer Repair Academy podcast. Until next time, keep those PCs running smoothly.